So one frequent need is to transform continuous variables into categorical variables. Sometimes this is needed for doing categorical analysis. So a typical use case would be where you have a large set of continuous variables and you would like to reduce the data set into more practical uh, classifiable intervals. So age is a good example. So for instance, we have this variable called age in this data set. Now we have so there are about 433 observations which contain different values. Now I may not need each individual value, right? That may not be providing me enough knowledgeable insights. Uh, Instead of that, I could just create categories which are equally spaced and then compare those categories if that if I could basically understand the response in context of the newly created categories rather than looking at individual values, right? Because sometimes, for example, it may not matter to me whether age is 59 or 56, and I could just have that as a category of age between 50 and 60, right? So it depends on the need. So if there is a need to convert continuous variables into categorical variables, in that case, I could just simply the first thing I would need to do is I need to have some way of defining the intervals. How large or small an interval should be. Whether it should be of size 5, 10, 15, 20, and so I should have that criteria. And secondly, once I define the interval, I should have the ability to label it so that instead of working with the intervals directly, I could just use another interaction to work with labels instead. So here's a quick command to do that. So for instance, I could create a variable called labels through this cut command, where I'm specifying a sequence. There's a sequence command in R which basically allows me to specify the start interval, the end interval, or the lower limit and upper limit, and the spacing. So in this case, I'm taking the lower limit as 0, higher limit as 100 because this is an age variable, and then I'm specifying the spacing as 10. So that's how my interval will be sized. And then I'm basically creating a label which is chosen from the English letters. Right? So since my spacing is of 10 and my upper limit is 100, and that's why I think it is enough for me to specify 1 to 10 for my labels. So I have basically labels which are specified from A to J. So this is the command which basically allows you to do that, and then you can look at how these labels are. So basically, your previous data set, which shows continuous values, are now replaced with individual labels, which are derived from English letters. And so that's the label part. And then let's look at the intervals. So this also needs to be put separately. And so this basically tells us how each continuous value falls into the newly defined intervals, which are spaced, which are of size 10. Right? So at the bottom you see 10 levels, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. So those are the intervals, and each interval is of equal size, which is defined in the sequence command. And I could, if there is a need, I could have this as either right-handed or left-handed. So that's basically providing another parameter. And you can see that there's a there's this open bracket on the left hand side, and then there is a closed bracket on the right hand side. That's a square bracket, right? So square bracket is a closed. That's basically a closed interval, and it is open on the left hand side. If I do right is equal to false, then I get the reverse result, right? So essentially, the open bracket is on the right hand side, the square bracket is on the left hand side. This is typically used, if you're aware of calculus, this is used in defining the limit intervals. Right? So where I include the upper limit or whether I exclude the upper limit, and similarly on the lower side, whether I include the lower limit or exclude the lower limit in my interval definition. So that's how it gets specified. So once we have the interval variables and the labels defined, then we can just quickly create a simple data frame object that brings all of this together. So the original continuous variables along with intervals and labels, and then you can do a quick snapshot.